The idea of racism only kicks in, the concept, the force of racism only kicks in when there is a victim, another race. For example, if you lived in Scotland and you're only surrounded by Scots and you don't encounter anybody else, you might have antipathy towards another Scot, but it would be called something else. I'm not quite sure what it would be called. Clanism, I don't know. Were, for instance, the English racist while they basically lived as a monoculture, or as much more of a monoculture? My brother commented the other night on the Africans present in the TV show The King and the Conqueror. I think there were two of them. Well, Rome, the city, and the empire had an African population. Roman legions had occupied Britain for 400 years, 600 years before 1066, et voila. The things that we imagine today and assume about the past are partly true and then not, depending on what we need the past to do for us in the present, which is mostly give us a sense of identity, I suppose, or self. Who am I? What do I come from? What does my DNA reveal about me? I don't have this curiosity, but it is out there. It's huge and it's growing. And it's largely, I think, because we are educated to believe that we are the sum of our ancestral parts, which is dubious. Partly in my own case, this is because my identity, my position in the world is as a white man and has never been challenged. Or if it was a very long ago when I was a Celt or a Norse. Apart from some late teenage gang stuff in the London scene in the late 70s, I have never been threatened. Or more truthfully, I've never felt threatened. And I have been around a lot. I've lived in lots of different places. I think racism slumbers in certain cultures, maybe in all, until a person who identifies themselves as white, for instance, feels threatened. Slumbers depending on how dependent psychologically the individual member is on the group for identity. The Judy Davis character in A Passage to India is overwhelmed by something British culture allowed her to suppress to such an extent that the very atmosphere of India seemed to trigger this impulse in her, this natural human impulse. This awakens a sleeping racism. Her indoctrination or involving as a person creates a panic. But it's not India, it's her. The massively successful British experiment in humanness is pinioned by its great distortions. What it does with what it has judged as sin, deviation, etc. We wasps are so defined by this culture, we are not choosing anymore. We have no will in the process, just assumption. We will violently claim that our creation, our values are the only ones. And we will colonize, freighted by some insane notion that all we need to do is make the planet British and all will be well. When the Brits traveled to the great civilization of India, for instance, or ran into the great Iroquois nation, they came armed literally and psychically. We are better than them. In other words, racism is in the racist, not in its victim. It's always likely to be triggered when I might be threatened by difference. And also it seems to develop out of a sense of identity that we needed long ago too, as Governor Pritzker, as a defense mechanism, because we're surrounded by enemies and we needed to be educated out of this natural but instinctive but undesirable intolerance. I think the reality is actually the opposite, that we are educated into our bigotries and left alone with strangers, we do very well. Left to our own instinctive devices. I can't be sure, but that's how it worked for me as a child, moving around a lot in countries where I was a minority. It's probably a flimsy line, but the price of any group identity is that it will make you inevitably a racist. Even a smart and seemingly secure man like Benjamin Franklin had a remarkable hierarchy of others, which of course English white topped. as he had competed and succeeded as a young man by his intellectual prowess and high standards of culture, and as he would define both, Native Americans or Africans or Irish, and famously Italians, would be judged inferior to greater or lesser degree, but always inferior. Could he have let this go? I'll never know. There's no evidence in my culture's expression of itself that successful men could look across a smoky tavern and see a Huron telling stories and holding court and feel admiration. What I know of my culture's expression, from Shakespeare to Dostoevsky, is they had no doubt who the heroes and exemplars were. Shakespeare was probably a secret admirer of Moors and Jews, but his work was in promoting his own. Describing any white man as inherently superior to his Calibans wasn't necessary. It was assumed by his audience. The tricky bit is the identity bit. The same thing that sustains us, apparently, our cultural identity, makes us racist. The root is the same. We can prickster this, of course. It is a liberal given, but I don't believe the conversion. I think the bigotry remains as long as we need our group to be meaningful, to be special. I enjoy my culture, but I don't think it is special. I'd not be diminished if someone discovered Shakespeare was born and raised in Burundi. He or she would still be Shakespeare or Jim or Jill or Kaisha. The plays would not change, except they show a strong preoccupation with European monarchs, long ago, far away, talking funny, though not as funny as we think. The 7 Ages of Man speech is pretty great, but it is spoken by a malcontent, so probably a little testy in intention. The poet describes the stages, but apart from deliberation, suggests no reason why the soldier becomes the judge. Debilitation suggests no reason why the soldier becomes the judge, or most powerfully, how and why the lover becomes the soldier. I played the part, and I did think that the stages were more like commandments. You are like this, possibly, like DNA, though they are also as archetypal as Jung, and that one stage leads organically to the next if we are allowed to exist in each fully for its age. I would wonder which of these 7 stages are we furnished with. Just asking. I have no answer beyond my own, but we don't all soldier nor justice either, the 2 useful ages. Are our teens allowed to be lovers? What happens in the story of adolescence, the TV show? What stage is disallowed by culture that makes a homicide? Or is it all just social media? And why does it happen? And do we let it happen? And why? It is a playing of many parts. And the poor youth doesn't want to go to school, the beginning of education. Apparently, men only count, but he might have had 7 stages of woman in that mighty mind also, just never wrote it down, never got around to it. Stuck in the age of pantaloons, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, well, I suppose what I'm saying is that somehow in the construction of the self, in the realization of the self, we can go several ways. We can have rituals and rites and tests and all those kinds of things that actually individuate us. Look it up, it's Carl Jung. Or we can go into this process, which is social, society, or cultural. And it is that process that leaves us racist, because we attach ourselves to the values and the mystique and the mythology of our group, our religion. And we transpose ourselves onto that, and we therefore make that superior to everybody else, ignoring the individual. La la la.